It is from God of your Father who will help you, from the omnipotent one who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, with blessings of the deep that couches below, with blessings of breast and womb. The blessings bestowed by God upon your father have surpassed the blessings bestowed upon my parents to the utmost bounds of the eternal hills. May they be upon the head of Joseph, upon the head of him who was separated from his brothers. He will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your land, your grain and your wine and your oil, the offspring of your cattle and the flocks of your sheep, on the land which he swore to your ancestors to give you. He shall be blessed more than all the nations. There shall be no barren male or female among you or among your cattle. A good vach, Shavua Tov, a good week to you, my holy sisters and brothers. Great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. I was just reading from the blessings that we read upon the conclusion of Shabbos after we do Havdalah. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Paul in the far north suburbs of Chicago, Lucy in Minnesota, Melissa in Great Neck, Bella in Florida, Paul in the Great Northwest, Joseph in Massachusetts, Paula loves the blessings, Gisette in Colorado, Julia in St. Paul's, North Carolina, Lynn in North Texas, Aoife in Florida, Marjorie, shalom from Georgia. I am thinking of gold plating these toothpicks. Very good. Welcome, everybody. Every page is valuable. Every daf of the Talmud is precious. Every daf contains layers upon layers of learning that we can do. But some are just perhaps, more fun than others, more easy to access the wisdom, more challenging, more fecund with apparent meaning. And this is just one of those good ones. It's just a lot of real pearls of wisdom in tonight's daf. We are on page Chaf Aleph, page 21 here in Tractate Sotah, the 18th volume of the Talmud. Generally speaking, the laws of the suspected adulteress. We are in chapter 3, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 2. And there was this idea that when the suspected adulteress, who became a Sotah because she was warned by her husband not to seclude herself with a particular man in front of witnesses, she received the warning, and then witnesses saw her seclude herself with that particular man, and then she and her husband became prohibited to each other, and no one knows but she and her lover whether she actually committed adultery or not. So she's going to come down with the husband to Jerusalem when the temple is standing there. And she's going to go through this ritual, the ritual of the Sotah, and the bitter waters, the waters that contain a little bit of dust from the floor of the temple, and the ink from the verses of the Sotah and the Torah that was copied over onto a parchment and then dissolved into that water. And as we learned, just a little bit of wormwood to make it actually taste bitter. And then these waters will evaluate whether she is innocent or guilty. And if she's innocent, she'll be fine, and even she'll conceive and bear seed. But if she's guilty, the waters will kill her. And she's not even going to be finished drinking the waters when she's going to turn green and her body's going to start to fall apart. And she'll die from the ritual. But we learn that if she possesses merit, some kind of merit, she won't die right away, and that the death penalty imposed by heaven through this miraculous ritual will be delayed 1 year or 2 years or even 3 years. So what is this merit that would delay heaven's death penalty? That's what we're learning. So we pick it up on page 21, just near the top. And the Mishna states, and there is a merit that delays punishment for 3 years. And the Gemara asks, which merit can delay the punishment of a Sotah? If we say it is the merit of the Torah that she has studied, but a woman who studies Torah is one who is not commanded to do so and performs the mitzvah. So right when we have, and as we've learned many times, one who is commanded to do a particular mitzvah receives more merit for doing that mitzvah than one who is not commanded to do so, right? Fulfilling our obligations earns a higher merit than just doing things that are voluntary. You'd almost think it's counterintuitive, but we've learned that lesson a bunch of times. So women are not obligated in Torah study. So since it's not obligated and it's a lesser reward than doing something that is obligated, why is this such a big merit that it could forestall this penalty for 3 years? So if we say it's the merit Torah, but she was not commanded and she performs it. So rather, perhaps it is the merit of a mitzvah that she has performed, something that she was obligated to do. And the Gemara asks, does the merit of a mitzvah protect one so much as to delay her punishment for 3 years? But isn't it taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Menachem Bar Yosei interpreted this verse homiletically? From Proverbs 6:23, for the mitzvah is a lamp and the Torah is light. Right? So mitzvah, and remember that often in kind of, the culture, secular culture especially, the word mitzvah has come to mean good deed. Many mitzvahs that we perform feel like good deeds, but that's not what the word means. What the word means is commandment, right? So when you're doing what the Torah commands you to do, that is a mitzvah. And so we learn from Proverbs that the mitzvah is a lamp, and the Torah is light. So the verse associates the mitzvah with a lamp and the Torah with the light of the sun. So the mitzvah is associated with a lamp in order to say to you that just as a lamp does not protect one by its light extensively, but only temporarily, while the lamp is near to a person, right? A lamp can't light up your whole life. It can only light up the room that you're in, or the area that you're standing in when you're carrying such a lamp. Whereas the sun lights up the entire world, right? So the mitzvah. That just as a lamp does not protect one by its light extensively, but only temporarily while the lamp is in one's hand, so too a mitzvah protects one only temporarily, i.e. while one is performing the mitzvah. Right? So we have this idea that one who is engaged in performing a mitzvah has an extra level of protection from the dangers of the world. And this is why very often it's a tradition that if you have a friend who's going on a journey, especially if he's going overseas, but anyone who's going on a journey, so you give him $1 and you tell him, give this $1 to a needy person when you arrive at your destination. So now this person who's taking your charity dollar for you and going to deliver it to a needy person at his destination has an extra measure of protection during the entire journey because he's acting as your agent in the performance of a mitzvah, right? Now his whole journey is not just a pleasure trip or a business trip, but in fact now the trip becomes a mitzvah journey, right? To give help to the needy. And that's based on this idea that one who is engaged in a mitzvah, while he's engaged in it, has this extra measure of protection. And the Torah itself is associated with light, right? Not just a lamp, but light generally, in order to say to you, just as the light of the sun protects one forever, so too the Torah that one studies protects one forever. And it states in the previous verse with regard to the Torah, in Proverbs 6:22, when you walk, it shall lead you. When you lie down, it shall watch over you. When you awake, it shall talk with you. And the Gemara explains, phrase by phrase, when you walk, it shall lead you. This is referring to when one is in this world. When you lie down, it shall watch over you. This is referring to the time of death, when we're transitioning from this life to the next life, and when one lies in the grave. And when you awake, it shall talk with you. This is referring to the time to come after the resurrection of the dead. And the Torah that one studies protects him or her both in this world and in the next world. And this can be illustrated by a parable, as it is comparable to a man who is walking in the blackness of night and the darkness, and he is afraid of the thorns and of the pits and of the thistles which he cannot see due to the darkness. And he is afraid of the wild animals and of the bandits that lurk at night. and he does not know which way he is walking, right? And even though we don't all walk around in the woods at night in the dark without a flashlight, right? This parable is saying that's not the only time we're walking in darkness. In fact, this whole world is a place of darkness where there are many people involved in sin and there are many dangers, and we're all bumbling about in the darkness, as it were. So if a torch of fire, like a lamp, comes his way, so this is analogous to a mitzvah. And while he has this torch, he is safe from the thorns and from the pits and from the thistles. He can see his immediate environment. He's not going to bump into stuff, but he is still afraid of the wild animals and of the bandits that could jump on him from out of the darkness. He doesn't have protection against that. And he still does not know which way he is walking. Once the light of dawn rises, which is analogous to Torah study, he is safe from the wild animals and from the bandits, which no longer roam the roads. But he still does not know which way he is walking. If he arrives at a crossroads and recognizes the way, then he is saved from all of them. Right? So we have three kinds of danger: bumping around into stuff that's immediately around us, being attacked by bandits and wild animals that could jump out of the darkness, and being lost, right? So being engaged in a mitzvah protects you from bumping into the things that are near you. And you can imagine, right? That's all, spiritually speaking, when you're engaged in a mitzvah, you're unlikely to be tempted, by sinful temptations that are right near to you, that even are coming from you, from your evil inclination. When you study Torah, so your protection grows because you begin to desire the right things, and then you won't fall prey to these wild animals and bandits, right? Which are your longings, etc. But what about this idea of being lost and not having direction? And that when you come to a crossroads and recognize where you are, a familiar intersection, then you will no longer be lost, and now you'll have a direction in life. So, right, the lamp is akin to the mitzvah. Light generally, or say from the sun, is akin to Torah study. What is this crossroads? And the Gemara does not answer that question yet. We'll come back to that. Alternatively, the verse from Proverbs associates the mitzvah with a lamp and the Torah with the light of the sun in order to teach that a transgression extinguishes the merit of a mitzvah that one performed, but a transgression does not extinguish the merit of the Torah that one studied. As it is stated, Song of Songs 8:7, many waters cannot extinguish the love, neither can the floods drown it. The Torah is compared to love several times in the Song of Songs. One can conclude from the Baraisa that the merit of performing a mitzvah is insufficient to suspend punishment, whereas Torah study can suspend punishment, right? Like connecting this back to this idea of the Sotah, that it's going to delay her punishment even for a significant amount of time. What merit is it that's protecting her? One view was that it's the mitzvahs that she's performed. Another view is the Torah that she has studied. Right, so here the idea is a mitzvah, like the mitzvahs that you perform are going to provide a certain amount of protection, but the sins that you perform might cancel that protection, whereas the Torah that you have studied, even though you may come to do sins, the sins aren't going to wipe away the Torah that you studied. Now, Rav Yosef said that with regard to a mitzvah, at the time when one is engaged in its performance, it protects one from misfortune and saves one from the evil inclination. At the time one is not engaged in its performance, it protects one from misfortune, but it does not save him from the evil inclination. With regard to Torah study, both at the time that one is engaged in it and at the time when one is not engaged in it, it protects one from misfortune and saves him from the evil inclination. Right? The more Torah you study, the more good luck you'll have, as it were, and the more you will suppress your own evil urges. Now, Rabbah objects to this explanation. Remember, the Talmud is a record of many discussions, right? The Talmud never is a single view of the matter. So when you hear something that's from the Talmud, the next question is, well, who's saying that? And do the other sages agree with him, right? So here we're involved in a debate, as it were. So Rabbah objects to Rav Yosef's explanation. He says, if that is so, then with regard to Doeg, see 1 Samuel chapters 21 and 22, and Achitophel, see 2 Samuel chapter 16, who were both wise scholars despite their wickedness, did they not engage in the study of Torah? Why did it not protect them from their own evil urges, which led them to sin? So rather, Rabbah said, with regard to Torah study, at the time one is engaged in it, it protects and saves. At the time one is not engaged in it, it protects one from misfortune, but it does not save one from the evil inclination. With regard to a mitzvah, both at the time one is engaged in its performance, at the time one is not engaged in its performance, it protects one from misfortune, but it does not save one from the evil inclination, right? So neither mitzvahs nor Torah study in and of themselves are enough to save a person from his own evil inclination. In fact, as we heard God say to Cain, right? After he killed when he was jealous of Abel, and God says, sin will crouch at your door, right? Sin is always crouching at your door. And then, what's the name of the writer? Steinbeck has a beautiful discussion about that passage in his book, East of Eden, where he says that, different translators of the Hebrew in the Bible have offered different philosophies about the nature of sin and the evil inclination, right? In some Bibles you'll read, sin crouches at your door, but you will overcome it. Sin crouches at your door, but you can overcome it. Sin crouches at your door, but you may overcome it. And these have different meanings. And I think that the bottom line is sin will always crouch at your door, and you can overcome it if you train yourself and strengthen yourself and recognize that there is a God in the world and there is a right and a wrong, and that you have to strive to do the right, and you have to, many times you'll fall. I think it's also Proverbs, right? That the tzaddik, the righteous person, falls 7 times and gets back up. We'll make mistakes, but the more you learn from them, the less hold the evil inclination will have over you. Ravina said, actually, the merit that delays the punishment of the Sotah is the merit of Torah study. And with regard to that which you say, i.e. that she is not commanded to study Torah and she performs the mitzvah that she's not commanded to do, the Mishna is not referring to the merit of her own Torah study. Granted, she is not commanded to study Torah herself. However, in reward for causing her sons to read the written Torah and to learn the Mishnah, and for waiting for her husband until he comes home from the study hall, doesn't she share the reward with her sons and her husband? Therefore, if the Sotah enabled her sons and husband to study the Torah, the merit of their Torah study can protect her and delay her punishment, right? So there's the idea. First of all, it is a mitzvah to study Torah for men, right? And women are not obligated in Torah study, although as we've seen, that may have changed a bit, right? Kind of in ancient times, right? The reason that women weren't obligated in Torah studies is because of time-bound positive commandment. Women were busy with child rearing, etc., and women were generally not getting an education in the ancient world. Now in the modern world, that women are getting fantastic education, often better than men. So then shouldn't Torah study accompany their secular studies? And there's definitely a view that would say yes. So with regard to the aforementioned parable, the Gemara asks, what is the meaning, right, above when we said that the mitzvahs will save you, from the immediate danger of thorns and thistles and pits, holes in the road, potholes, and then Torah study will save you from the bandits and wild animals, but it won't save you from being lost, right, and having direction in life. You will only be saved from being, having no direction when you come to a crossroads and understand where you are. So in that parable, what is the crossroads? What does that represent? So what is the meaning of the crossroads, which provide clarity to a person and give them direction? And Rav Chisda says this is referring to a Torah scholar and his day of death. due to his continued commitment to the Torah, when the time comes for him to die, it is clear to him that he will go to the place of his eternal reward. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says this is a Torah scholar who has also acquired fear of sin, as his fear of sin guides him to the correct understanding of the Torah. This would be an answer to the objection raised above about Dog and Achitophel, characters in the Bible who were Torah scholars and yet committed great wickedness. Also, we have Acher, right? Elisha ben Abuye, who was a scholar of the Talmudic period, who went bad, right? Who went really bad and became an evil person, despite having tremendous accomplishments in Torah study. So Torah study is highly necessary, highly advantageous, highly something that we must pursue, but it is not enough to save us from fear of from sin. What we need is to develop fear of sin. Right? A person has to develop fear of sin. Torah study can help us do that, but it's not going to guarantee it. Right? So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, this is a Torah scholar who has acquired fear of sin, as his fear of sin guides him to the correct understanding of the Torah. Right now, there you're making a very important point, and this is why we have this idea that you should not study Torah alone. You should study with a study partner. You should study with a rabbi. You should study with a class. At the very least, like you're here with us, right? Here we're learning here together. You shouldn't study alone, because if you only study alone, you could easily come to misunderstand the words of the written Torah. And even though you think you're acting righteously, it could lead you to sin, because you could just come up with your own interpretations of what the Torah is saying, and they will not be correct, and they could, lead you to sin. Mar Zutra says that this crossroads that provides clarity, this is a Torah scholar who reaches conclusions from his discussion in accordance with the halacha, as that is an indication that he is following the right path. Right? You should learn with others. And one way to, an effective way to do that is first learn alone, see what a conclusion you come to, and then learn with others and see, what conclusions they came to and what exactly is the law. You look it up in Shulchan Aruch, so you're testing yourself. Did I come up with the right conclusion? If you're coming up with the right conclusions, you're on the right path generally in life. Now, the Brisa states, alternatively, a transgression, a sin, extinguishes the merit of a mitzvah, but a transgression does not extinguish the merit of Torah. This would apply to the Sotah, right? Her sin in committing adultery might extinguish the merit of a mitzvah, but it wouldn't extinguish the merit of her Torah study. And Rav Yosef says, Rabbi Menachem Bar Yosef interpreted this verse as it was given on Mount Sinai. And had Doeg and Achitophel only interpreted in this way, they would not have pursued David, as it is written, for my enemies speak concerning me, saying, God has forsaken him, pursue and take him, for there is none to deliver. Right? So these are the people who David formerly looked up to and then turned on him because they thought he was weak and this was the time to pounce. Doeg and Ahitophel incorrectly thought that since David had sinned, right, the sin with Bathsheba, his sins had extinguished his merits and God had forsaken him. But they were wrong. And the Gemara asks, what verse did Doeg and Ahitophel interpret incorrectly which caused them to make this mistake? They interpreted this verse, for the Lord your God walks in the midst of your camp to give up your enemies before you, that he see no licentious matter in you and turn away from you. Deuteronomy 23:15. And this indicates that God turns away from one who is engaged in forbidden relations. And since David had sinned with Bathsheba, God must have turned away from him. But Doeg and Ahitophel did not know that a transgression extinguishes the merit of a mitzvah, but a transgression does not extinguish the merit of the Torah. And David had tremendous merit from Torah study because, after all, he wrote Psalms. And the Gemara interprets the continuation of the verse cited by the Baraisa with regard to Torah study. What is the meaning of many waters cannot extinguish the love? If a man would give all the fortune of his house for love, he would utterly be condemned. Now, if love is likened to Torah, Wouldn't it be meritorious for a person to give up wealth in order to pursue Torah, right? To give up the fortune of his house for love? That should be good. So why would he be utterly condemned? And the Torah is compared to love several times in the Song of Songs. Therefore, the verse indicates that one cannot acquire a share in the reward for Torah study with money. You can't purchase the merit of Torah study. You have to toil in it. Ula says, the verse is not speaking of individuals like Shimon, the brother of Azariah, whose brother Azariah supported him and enabled him to study Torah. And it is not speaking of individuals like Rabbi Yochanan of the house of the Nasi, whom the Nasi supported so that he could study Torah. And then the example is not given here, but it would also follow that this is not speaking about the arrangement that the sons of Jacob, Zebulun and Issachar, not so much of the sons, but their descendants, their tribes, right? Because when the children of Israel emerged from the wilderness and entered the promised land led by Joshua, and they conquered the Canaanites who were living there, and then they distributed the portions in the land to the various tribes. So Zebulun and Issachar kind of were neighboring tribes, and one of them was known to be Torah scholars, I think that's Issachar, and the other were known to be merchants who did well in business. And they made an arrangement together that the businessmen would support their cousins, as it were, in their Torah study. So if you make that arrangement in advance, right, that you know, let's say that you're a person, you know what, you tried studying Torah, it just doesn't work for you, but you'd like to share in the merit of Torah study, so you use your hard-earned money to support Torah study, then yes, you do share in the merit of that Torah study. So when does it not work? Rather, this verse that says you cannot purchase the merit of Torah study is speaking like individuals like Hillel and Shevna. As when Rav Dimi came to Babylonia, he said Hillel and Shevna were brothers. Hillel engaged in Torah study and remained impoverished, whereas Shevna entered into a business venture and became wealthy. In the end, Shevna said to Hillel, "Come, let us join our wealth together and divide it between us. I will give you half of my money, and you will give me half of the reward for your Torah study." And in response to this request, a divine voice issued forth and said, if a man would give all the fortune of his house for love, he would be utterly condemned. Right? You can't wait till the end of your life when you've acquired a lot of money and then say, oh, you know, I don't have any merit of Torah study. Let me give away a bunch of money to Torah scholars. Then it's too late. Right? So on a regular basis, you want to make donations to Torah study, right? So when you think about your charitable giving, and you should always be giving away, 10% of your net income. That's what tithing is. And what are you going to give it to? What's great about that is no matter how little money you make in the world, you don't have to be a rich person at all. But if you set aside 10% of your net income, to support causes that you believe in, well, then you're in the role of a philanthropist, and you have to consider, okay, what causes do I want to give to? Obviously, it's good to giving to, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless. Those are very good causes. But you also want to include supporting Torah study and people, who share Torah with others. Because that is a tremendous merit, and then whether or not you made regular times in your life every day to study Torah or not, when you support those who do and enable them to study more Torah and share more Torah with others, then you share in that merit of Torah study. Needless to say, we are a nonprofit organization at Accidental Talmudist, and you're always welcome to support Torah study through us at accidentaltalmudist.org. Let's continue. We're on 21b. The Mishna states, from here, Ben Azai states, a person is obligated to teach his daughter Torah. Didn't we just say that women are not obligated in Torah study? But now Ben Azai says a person is obligated to teach his daughter Torah so that if she drinks and does not die immediately, she will know that some merit of hers has delayed her punishment. And Rabbi, because what he's saying is, God forbid she should end up committing adultery. Okay, so then at that moment, the Torah study that she has could save her life for some amount of time. right? Or if she sees other people drink some other woman drink the waters of bitterness, who is who is an adulteress, who committed adultery, she's guilty, and then she does not die. And then your daughter sees that and says, oh, well, I guess the bitter waters is phony. It doesn't work because that woman is guilty, but she didn't die. Because your daughter was taught, some Torah, including this passage about the Sotah and the idea that the merit of Torah study can preserve her for some amount of time, your daughter won't make that mistake to think that the bitter water doesn't work. Now, Rabbi Eliezer says, anyone who teaches his daughter, this is very controversial. What's Rabbi Eliezer going to say? Rabbi Eliezer says, anyone who teaches his daughter Torah is teaching her promiscuity. And the Gemara says, could it enter your mind to say that teaching one's daughter Torah is actually teaching her promiscuity? Rather say it is considered as if he taught promiscuity. What does that mean? How could the Gemara say this? What does that mean? So Rabbi Abahu says, what is the reason of Rabbi Eliezer's statement? It is as it is written, I, wisdom, dwell with cunning. Proverbs 8:12, which indicates that once wisdom enters into a person, cunning enters with it. Rabbi Eliezer fears that the woman will use the cunning she achieves by learning the wisdom of the Torah to engage in promiscuous behavior. What does he mean? What we're getting at here, and this is not only going to apply to women by any means, it's this idea that a little knowledge is dangerous. A little knowledge is dangerous, right? If you're going to engage in Torah study, you have to keep studying. It's never ending. There's always more to learn. And as you go about it, it will also make you humble because you realize how much you don't know. But if you only learn a little, you're like, oh, okay, I got it. Let's say like me, you took a course in college, the Bible is literature, and over the course of 6 weeks, you read the whole Bible. You're like, okay, I know that stuff. I read it. So then you have like maybe just enough knowledge to pick and choose passages that'll justify whatever behavior your evil inclination is leading you to. And you're like, what are you talking about? People don't understand. I read the Bible. I know I can do this. That's the kind of cunning that can accompany, a slight amount of learning and end up producing a dangerous result. So the Gemara asks, and the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Eliezer, what do they do with this verse, I, wisdom, dwell with cunning? How do they interpret that? And the Gemara responds, he requires that verse for that which Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, states, interpreting the word orma as nakedness rather than cunning. As Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, the matters of Torah do not endure except in one who stands naked for them. Naked as a positive. As it is stated, I, wisdom, dwell with nakedness. And this means that wisdom dwells only with one who is prepared to give away all his possessions for the sake of Torah study. And Rabbi Yochanan says, the matters of Torah do not endure except in one who considers himself as one who does not exist. As it is stated, but wisdom, it can be found in nothingness. Right? In other words, you have to mevatel yourself, right? You have to nullify yourself, meaning nullify your ego. You've got to humble yourself and understand when you set out to learn Torah that the learning is endless. There's so many of toil before you, so many who know more than you, and you've got to be open, shed your predispositions and your prejudices, and just be like a blank slate, ready to learn and continue to be ready to learn and be humble about it. Now, the Mishna states that Rabbi Yehoshua says, a woman desires to receive this was back to our Mishnah number 2 here in chapter 3. A woman desires to receive the amount of a kav of food and an intimate relationship rather than receive 9 kavs of food and have abstinence. And the Gemara asks, what is he saying? And this is what Rabbi Yehoshua is saying. A woman desires to receive the amount of a kav of food and with it an intimate relationship with her husband rather than 9 kavs of food and with it abstinence, since her desires are of a physical nature and it is undesirable to her to study Torah. So Rabbi Yehoshua you can interpret this negatively for sure and say, okay, women aren't so intellectual. They care more about, having an intimate relationship with a husband. And we can see that she would rather, have a relationship with her husband, even if it means that, like a good relationship with her husband who's a poor man and is only going to provide her a meager amount of food at her table. She'd rather have that than be married to a rich man who doesn't have a good intimate relationship with her. I think that's good wisdom for anybody. And I don't necessarily read, as Rabbi Yehoshua does, this concept as teaching that therefore, she is more focused on having a good physical relationship than she would be on the intellectual pursuit of Torah study. But that's what Rabbi Yehoshua says. The Mishnah continues that Rabbi Yehoshua, would say, a foolish man of piety and a conniving wicked person and an abstinent woman and those who injure themselves out of false abstinence, all these are people who erode the world. And the Gemara asks, who is considered a foolish man of piety? For example, it is one who sees that a woman is drowning in a river, and he says it is not proper conduct to look at her while she is undressed, and therefore I will not save her, right? That is somebody who's being an idiot. Because, absolutely correct, you have to shield your eyes from ever seeing nakedness. A man should never look at pornography, should never look at, a nude woman who is not his wife. But if that nude woman is drowning and he's in a position to save her life, obviously you save her life. That would be the foolish man of piety who neglects to do that. And the Gemara asks, who is considered a conniving wicked person? And Rabbi Yochanan says, this is one who presents his statement to the judge before the other litigant comes, and thereby prejudices the judge in his favor. And Rabbi Abahu says this is referring to one who gives a dinar to a poor man in order to complete the sum of 200 dinars for him, so that he will no longer be entitled to receive charity. As we learned in a Mishnah, Peh 8:8, one who has 200 dinars may not collect gleanings, forgotten sheaves, payah, and the poor man's tithe, since he is not defined as poor. However, if he has 200 minus 1, even if he is given 1,000 dinars at once, he may collect. Right? So this idea of who is the conniving wicked person, it's somebody who knows the law very well and uses it to screw other people. And Rabbi Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says a conniving wicked person is one who provides advice to male orphans to sell from the small quantity of property left to them by their father before it is appropriated by the court for the purpose of providing a dowry for the daughters who do not inherit property. And this causes the daughters to lose their right to sustenance, although it is improper to do so. And although it is improper to do this, the sale cannot be reversed. As Rabbi Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says with regard to male orphans who preemptively sold the property from a small estate, that which they sold, they sold. The sons retained the money, and the daughters, their sisters, would be out of luck. Right? So somebody who gives that kind of advice to the young male orphans, and even perhaps benefits from it personally, that's a conniving wicked person. And Abaye says a conniving wicked person is one who provides advice to sell property in accordance with the ruling of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, as it is taught in a Baraisa, with regard to one who said, my property is given to you, and after you die, it will go to so-and-so, another person. And then the first beneficiary entered the property and sold it and consumed the profits. So the second beneficiary then repossesses the property from the purchasers as the property belongs to him after the death of the first beneficiary. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says the second beneficiary receives only that which the first beneficiary left, since the sale is valid. However, it is not permitted to sell the property ab initio, since the giver intended for the second beneficiary to raise the property. Again, these are nuances in property law that if somebody understood them really well, would enable him to create an inequitable result. That's a conniving wicked person. Rav Yosef Bar Chama says that Rav Sheshes says a conniving wicked person is one who persuades others with his ways, convincing others to mimic his seemingly righteous behavior in order to hide his own faults. And Rabbi Zarika says that Rav Huna says a conniving wicked person is one who is lenient in the halacha, in the law, for himself, but strict for others. Ula says, now we're in 22a, we're almost done, so if you have questions or comments, please get them in. Ula says a conniving wicked person is one who read the written Torah and learned the Mishnah, but did not serve Torah scholars in order to learn the reasoning behind the laws. Since he believes himself knowledgeable, he issues halachic rulings, but due to his lack of understanding, he rules erroneously and is therefore considered wicked. His cunning is in the public display of knowledge, which misleads others into considering him a true Torah scholar. And it was stated with regard to one who read the written Torah and learned the Mishnah, but did not serve Torah scholars, Rabbi Eliezer says this person is an ignoramus. And Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said this person is a boor. And Rabbi Yanai says this person is comparable to a... what's the word in Hebrew? Boor, Rabbi... Kusi, right? The Samaritan, a Kusi. This person is comparable to a Samaritan who follows the written Torah, but not the traditions of the sages. And Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says this person is comparable to a sorcerer, Magosh, who uses his knowledge to mislead people. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said it is reasonable to accept the opinion of Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, as people say proverbially, the sorcerer chants and does not know what he is saying. And so too the Tana teaches the Mishnah and does not know what he is saying. Again, we've seen it kind of repeated a bunch of times. One who acquires a little knowledge but does not attach himself to ones who are wiser and understand the Torah and the Mishnah and the Gemara at a much more profound level than he, that person will eventually take his own limited knowledge and create evil with it, right? You have to be humble about what you've learned, always strive to learn more, and attach yourselves to righteous sages who know much more than you, so that you will not misconstrue what the law, meaning what God, asks of us. Let's go to questions and comments. On Sotah 21. Load. Come on. Joseph, when your mind is focused on doing mitzvahs, you don't have time or energy to do any sin. You can't do two things at once. Agree, right? When you're focused on mitzvahs, you just don't have time to sin. You gotta be busy. You gotta be busy. I'm just gonna share a personal story from my misspent youth, right? So when I was pretty young, a young teenager, it was pretty common in my, neck of the woods in the suburbs where I grew up near New York for, kids in my circle, in my age, to smoke weed. It was against the law. It was a really bad idea. And, we thought it was cool, and we did. And after, some time of this, we got caught. And then what happened, right? So we got ratted out. One of the guy's brothers got caught, and he told on us, my friend and me. And my mom just freaked out. She was so upset. Oh my God, you're throwing your life away, etc. My grandmother lived with us, freaked out. My father was at work when he received this call. And so all day long, I'm kind of waiting for my father to get home and to, tell me what my punishment would be. And my father did something quite unexpected. When he got home that evening, he had a box under his arm. And he said to me, number one, you're very lucky that I was at work when I heard about this. Because if I'd been right with you, what can I say? I come from an earlier generation when, a kid would get a potch, right? A potch on the head. a bit of corporal punishment. And he says, you would have felt my wrath in that moment. But I've had all day to think about it. And it seems to me that you have a lot of time on your hands that you're wasting, literally, on the wrong kinds of activities. So here are your new running shoes. You're going to keep a journal. You're going to start running every day. And I want to see you up to 3 miles a day within a couple of weeks. And it's because my father was kind of at the tail end of the running hobby. My father went through a lot of hobbies, and he was kind of finishing up his running hobby at that time. But he meant it, and what choice did I have? So I started running every day, keeping a journal, how far I ran. And I think I started with about a mile and got it up to 3 miles in a few weeks. I say he was at the tail end of his hobby because he soon after that kind of got into bicycling, kind of in a serious way. And as he was sort of transitioning from running into bicycling, I was observing, watching him, that he was enjoying the bicycling. And I said, Dad, could I switch over to bicycling for my daily exercise that I have to log? And he said, sure. And he gave me, the first bike that he got into, because he quickly got into it and wanted a much better bike. So he gave me kind of his starter decent bicycle. And I started riding that. I really enjoyed it. As kind of a young teenager, really logging eventually some serious miles. It was a tremendous amount of freedom. Before I had my driver's license, I could roam many miles away from my house. And I got into it and then started racing. And I actually ended up being the New York State cycling champion in my age group. And a few years later, when I was applying to college, and some of you know I went to Harvard, and I wrote my application essay to Harvard all about cycling, and racing, and what it had taken to become the New York State champion. I didn't actually tell Harvard that started because I was smoking weed, but there you go. So my father, had tremendous wisdom. And this idea that Joseph said, it's that sometimes you end up sinning or doing transgressions because you have too much time on your hands and you want to stay engaged, in things that are more positive and correct and, legal and productive. So maybe there's a lesson there for those of you who are parents or will become parents or grandparents, etc. Now, here's a note from Nina. I have a different explanation about women studying Torah leads to promiscuity. She says a woman who discovers the joy of Torah study will want to continue and will need a good chavura to learn with. Since men are obligated and therefore most Torah scholars are men, she will therefore spend more time with men. Very interesting, Nina. And that would be just a good reason, right, for... I know Nina has said a bunch of times that she really prefers to daven, right, to pray in the company of women. She likes separate seating for men and women. And thank God we live in a time where, there is, first of all, there's online Torah study. So no matter who you're studying with, we can just keep it about the study, not about, something else that could become physical. But also, you can have study partners. If you're a woman, you can easily find another woman to be your study partner, or women's study groups. There's all just kinds of possibilities that are available now that were not available in the times of the Gemara. That's what I've got for us tonight. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, Sunday, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. For more of this, this discussion is just fascinating. And tomorrow, the sages are going to start by defining who is an ignoramus. What is the Talmudic definition of an ignoramus? And it might not be what you think.